Hey, welcome back to All Things New with John Michael on YouTube, and coming a little bit later today, All Things New with John Michael on podcast. So last week I had mentioned on the podcast that I probably misnamed these video clips and these podcast episodes, that we were going from hurt to healing and going from loneliness to intimacy. But the fact of the matter is that we're not moving from a place of hurt to healing. We're moving from a place of resentment to healing, and that we're not moving from loneliness to intimacy, but rather we're moving from a place of apathy to a place of intimacy. And last week on the podcast, we're not moving from sadness into acceptance, but we're moving from self-pity to acceptance. These emotions are all gifts. So if I were to rename these episodes, and I'm not going to, I just want to be very clear in how I communicate, but we're not moving. If I were to rename the episode, it wouldn't be from hurt to healing, but either the gift of hurt or from resentment to healing, because that's what's really happening. And so I just wanted to clear that up on YouTube now that I've already cleared it up on the podcast form. So last week we talked about sadness, the gift of sadness, and moving from a place of self-pity to a place of acceptance. And so, listen, that podcast I really appreciated, and I highly recommend it. I closed that episode with my personal testimony of going through some sadness. And let me just state very clearly and for the record that I believe that sadness and grief are not the same thing, right? Sadness is a gift that allows us to value and honor life and what we've lost. And quite frankly, sadness is going to be proportional, proportionate. Is it proportionate or proportional? Either way, the amount of sadness that you feel over a loss or a situation is probably a very good gauge and indicator of how much you value what was lost or who was lost. And so, but grief is going to be a process, right? And that can take anywhere from X amount of time to, some studies say up to 2 years. And so that's a very different thing. But if we're not careful and we get stuck in that time warp of grief and we never deal with that loss in the appropriate and healthy way, what can end up happening is we move to this place of self-pity where we want people to feel sad for us, right? Because we're not strong enough, and quite frankly, we're not brave enough to feel sad ourselves. We're not willing to go through the hurt of that loss. And again, hurt is a gift. When you lose someone and you feel that loneliness, it's a gift. It moves you to a place of intimacy. It moves you to a place of healing if you will allow it, and trust in the process, and trust in the God who loves you very much and works all things together for your good. And so that then when we go through some sadness will allow us to move to the place of acceptance, where we accept life on life's terms, right? Because we don't have control over all these things. And I'll say this too, sadness allows us to delight in things in its absolute deepest and fullest measure. And so we need to trust the gift of sadness and let it operate in our lives. So go back, check out that podcast if you so choose. And I sure appreciate you. And I will see you on the podcast in just a little bit, talking about anger. All right. Thanks so much. And I'll see you next time on All Things New with John Michael.